Hello, all. All right. Before I jump in, just kind of wanted you guys to jump in the comments. Let me know what you thought of the minicast, last week's minicast. Just 8 minutes, just kind of got to the point. I did it that way because I wanted something where you could take an idea and then just sort of replay it, right? So just a short podcast that gets to the point. And that particular segment has been very helpful for me over the last 10 days since it aired. Because I've just been replaying that idea over and over again. I think sometimes when it's such a long podcast, it's an hour and a half, there's so many ideas that get shared in each section that I kind of wonder if all of these bits get lost in the whole. And maybe I might be better off just sectioning them. So that was a little trial run. If you could leave a comment if you're on YouTube and just let me know what you thought of the minicast, or do you prefer just a deeper dive analysis or a mix of both? Would love to hear what you think. So this episode is going to be a continuation of the episode, the minicast from last week. I kind of wanted to build up from that. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, what are you waiting for? It's been up. And it's only 8 minutes, so you can listen to it and then you follow up with this. I will tell you that it has been even helpful to me. Sitting there with the idea that it is judgment that can turn a paradise into hell. I think a good analogy is I think one of the most beautiful places on this planet, one of the most beautiful, I'm not saying the most, but one of the most beautiful places on this planet is Hawaii. Now imagine you win a trip to Hawaii, or I bought you a ticket to Hawaii, all expense paid. And then you get there and the weather's great and the people are nice and the food is delicious and everything's just gorgeous. And then you start complaining, right? You start saying things like, oh man, it's great, but it's too hot, or it's rained too much, or my food's too salty, or the water's not cool enough, the water's too warm, right? After about a week of doing that, you would have turned something that's probably, like I said, one of the most beautiful places on this planet. You would have managed with your complaints to turn it to hell. And that's how you turn a paradise into hell. It's by judgment. So the analogy I used in the previous episode was, the Garden of Eden. It was paradise, and they existed in that space. And then the space never changed once they, quote, fell or ate the fruit. And for those of you who don't know, if you're just jumping in, I am not religious. I just take the truth where I can get it. Use a story to help people kind of visualize the point that I'm trying to make. Okay. Now, when they ate the fruit, when Adam and Eve ate the fruit and, quote, fell, the garden became hell to them, right? They started to find fault. It was the same space. It was the same place, the same location. But once their mindset changed, they began to suffer. They began to feel shame. They began to judge. They began to say, this is right and this is wrong. And that's what we're doing in this world. I always kind of look at this world and I look around, and there is a duality. The world is dual by nature, whether or not we want to acknowledge it, right? I've had a couple of people who reach out to me and say, it's very, the mindset of duality, you have to sort of rise above it. Because that's sort of the trap, isn't it, right? Black, white, up and down, left, right, conservative, liberal. You keep getting forced into these sort of dual opposites. But while you're in the world, it is helpful to know that it does force you into these sort of dual positions, but you also have to acknowledge that it's there. You have to acknowledge that it plays a part in our existence before you can rise above it. You can't rise above something if you're not aware of it. And that's what I see in this world. You have the plot. And overall, the plot, the setting, the set of this world, it's sort of neutral, isn't it? Right? You have nature. You've got the weather, which everybody loves to talk about, right? You've got, this sort of the environment, and it's there. Right? And for the most part, the environment does not necessarily cause us to suffer. We sit back and it provides. You throw a seed in the ground and give it enough time, it will provide you food, right? If you know how to know where to go, it will provide you water. It will provide you shelter. It will provide you sustenance. The setting in itself, everything that you see around you, your phone, right? Your car, your home, it was born out of what you found here, right? You didn't have to sort of out of thin air manifest wood or manifest plastic or manifest, you know, food. It's there. You might have turned it into something else, right? You might have turned wood into furniture or fossil fuel into plastic, right? But the setting provides. The world in itself, it provides. It doesn't try to harm you. It's not, an antagonist, right? There are some people who say, well, when a travesty or like a disaster occurs in certain areas, it's called an act of God, right? And there's a implication there that somehow Mother Nature is actually like hurting people, harming people, but it's not. It's just doing what it does, right? It's neutral. It's our interpretation of something that happened. We're the ones who are calling it, this. We're the ones who are interpreting it as this is an act of God. This is an act of nature. This is something that is destructive. Get out of the way, right? Like, or we just happen to be in the way, like earthquakes. I say that hopefully this is not like an ominous thing where like I'm foreshadowing something fucked up happening, but I'm in San Diego, California, right? Southern California. If an earthquake were to occur and the earth shifts, right? It's not an act of nature if people get hurt. It's not an act of God if people get hurt. Like the earth shifts every day. If you don't believe me, there's literally an app. I downloaded this app that would send you a notification whenever there was like an earthquake somewhere. And then about 10, 15 minutes later, I deleted the app because holy shit, there's a lot of earthquakes happening. The earth is constantly shifting. It's constantly in a state of flux. So as we live in San Diego or in Southern California, LA, right? If anything were to happen, if the big one were to strike, it's not necessarily an act of God. It's just shit happening. We just happen to be in the way. And so if people die from that, nothing happened to us. We just happen to be in the way of nature kind of doing its thing, right? Same thing with like viruses, right? Like that's just nature kind of doing its thing, right? These viruses sort of want to exist. These bacteria want to exist, right? And so if you create an opportunity for it to sort of proliferate itself or for a strain to, proliferate itself, it will. And you just happen to be there. And it's not personal, right? Just like when you watch those National Geographic shows, this happens on a macro level as well, right? You'll see like a lion and they're sort of hunting like a herd of game. And it's not personal to the antelope that gets eaten. That lion isn't specifically trying to take out that specific. It's not personal. It's just, hey, you just happen to be the slowest and I'm hungry, right? And then after the antelope is eaten, then the lion kind of like, it's done, right? The lion doesn't move like a human, right? If the lion moved like a human and the lion spotted a herd of like antelope, it would kill as many of the herd as possible beyond what could sustain it in that moment, create a storage system where it could store it, right? And then sell the rest, because that's what we do. We don't, regardless of the fact that we live in a simulation or in a situation, or whatever word you want to call it, a plane dimension that within itself provides, it's almost like we don't trust it, right? We don't trust it to provide. So we're like paranoid in a way that it won't take care of us, that the system won't do what it does, which is part of the thing that it does is it provides. I mean, it might provide to the detriment of something else, but it's a circle. Dare I say, the circle of life, right? So we move with a certain type of madness, and then we personalize everything. Like nature is out to get us, and that's how civilization sort of came to be where it is right now, right? It's that Ishmael is a good book that talks about this. All right, by the way, by Daniel Quinn. It started off where humanity, at least in the history that we're aware of, humanity was like hunter-gatherers, or I would reinterpret that to mean that they trusted the game would provide, right? They were just as casual about the fact that it does provide, because that's just like they took that for granted as a status quo. I'm not saying that they lived easily. And once again, how do we know? Right? It's like we're just kind of coasting what we're told, right? That it was a hard life with them, blah, blah, blah. And somehow modern times, the way things are set up, like it's supposed to be better. I don't see it, but it's fine. It is what it is. I'm not criticizing it. It is what it is. But they just knew that whatever the planet provides, they'll be okay. Right? And everything was kind of edible. Right? So, all right, well, look, that's game. Cool. I guess that's what we're supposed to eat today. Let's kill it. All right. But it was just that thing. They didn't like wipe out whole herds. Right. They were just like, let's go kind of walk around and see what we find. Oh, okay. Well, there's a deer. Cool. Well, I guess that's nature providing. So then they would kill the deer and then they would offer thanks to nature. Right. They didn't see nature as a thing that had to be sort of dominated. They saw nature as a kind of mother that would provide. And then a certain level of paranoia kicked in where we started judging. And by we, I mean the collective. A certain kind of madness kicked in where we stopped trusting, the game to provide and started wanting to control everything, right? We decided that it was not okay that you had to wait for certain seasons to eat certain things. So we decided that it was a bad thing that, the seasons changed and then you couldn't have deer year round, right? Because the deer migrated. And once they started to judge the simulation, and for those of you who are new, this whole podcast is operating from the premise that we are living in a simulation. So just, go with it. And I know it's just a theory, but once again, just go with it. Just pretend it's a story. If you don't subscribe to the simulation hypothesis, just pretend I'm telling you a beautiful fictional story, because it probably is a fictional story. But if it's not, you've listened to this, now you know. So, but they sort of started to doubt the programming of the simulation. But if you pay attention, that's the basic structure, right, of the simulation. It always provides. And even if some die, right, overall the collective keeps going, right? But it's ego that has sort of focused on the fact that an individual dying, quote, is a bad thing, first of all, and two, is sort of a detriment to the whole. But it's not. There was a video I posted on my Instagram. I've been pulling videos off TikTok and posting them onto Instagram and YouTube. Some of my older videos, I'm kind of remastering them and adding books into them and articles just to make them sort of multi-layered, so that if you want to go read more about, where am I getting this information from, it's all there. There was a video I did where I was talking about oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. Okay, I'll come back to that. But there's this idea, basically, that we have been infected by, where we think that we're not going to make it, right? So we have to do all of these things. We made a judgment on the nature of this reality. And if you look around, based on the way we act, the overall judgment is that we will not be taken care of, that we will not be provided for, that we're living in some sort of hostile world that must be dominated and must be controlled, right? Because somehow it will try to hurt us. When overall, okay, I remember now. So there's a video I did called, I think it was like the loop of the circle, the cycle. Basically talked about how like there are uncontacted tribes that are sort of like existing right now. And if we in the West sort of wipe ourselves out, Western civilization, they'll continue to sort of, do their thing until maybe one of them decides to stop being hunter-gatherers and adopt the practice of agriculture, which agriculture is actually what kind of fucked up everything, because agriculture in itself is the act of mankind attempting to dominate nature. And so that's the key, right? So once a tribe or collective adopts that practice of attempting to dominate the game because they're saying this is not okay the way the cycle is set up and we need to start controlling the game. We know better than how the setting, the neutral setting, instead of keeping the setting neutral and working within it, their minds decided that the setting isn't actually neutral, it's actually negative. And because we judged And by we, I mean Western society, not the collective, because not all cultures are like this, but there are certain cultures, and that mindset is infective. It's infectious rather. So once we decided that the game is negative, then we began to move accordingly. Once we judged that the game is negative, that Earth was hostile, that it was trying to harm us, right? For whatever reason, we began to develop agriculture, right? Because agriculture was an attempt to dominate something that had been determined was like hostile to us. And I could understand the trauma that comes from, like, let's say, I don't want to go beyond like the 200,000 years of like modern human civilization that we've been aware of, because we don't know what came before that. And in that video that I mentioned, where I talk about the loop of the cycle, the idea is that this loop happens over and over again, that some sort of like an intelligent collective, in this case, it happens to be humanoid. But I'm going to theorize it. I think there's a video that I'm sitting on that I need to edit, and I'm going to post it. But I'm going to theorize that Earth has housed intelligent civilizations of various forms, and it just changes the form. But ultimately, the overall overarching theme is an intelligence of like whatever species. So think of like Homo sapiens sapiens. Well, and think of consciousness as intelligence, right? And think of intelligence as a sort of like sentient life form that is like contained within DNA. And it wants to experience itself as various sort of intelligent versions of what the species we see around on this planet right now. So at this present moment, what we're witnessing is Homo sapien, which is just intelligent apes. I'm not saying that we are intelligent apes. I'm saying that we are intelligence embodied, right? We are a fractured intelligence, fractals of an intelligence, or fractals of a superintelligence, which we have called consciousness, right? Existing, the human race are collectively an intelligence embodied in the form of an ape. So I'm kind of blending everything together. And I want to make the argument that maybe 1 billion years ago, even, intelligence as a collective embodied itself as like a super intelligent species of reptiles. And maybe on this very same planet, there was also a civilization or a species of super intelligent insectoids, right? And I'm saying that this is a cycle that repeats over and over again, just in different forms. So right now, what we're looking around and seeing is intelligence embodied as Homo sapiens sapien. Remember, you're not your body. You are just experiencing this reality through the body of a Homo sapien. You are intelligence. Some say consciousness. I use the two interchangeably, as regular listeners should know. So you are intelligence that is embodied presently as Homo sapiens sapien. But that doesn't mean that this is the final form that intelligence will take. You might have future incarnations as or in another civilization or another species, but something like that's super intelligent. Like think like we have our dogs right now. Okay, so imagine like 500 years from now, the human race sort of wipes itself out, you know? And then the ones that are left behind sort of like or just stay the same. I don't want to say devolve, but just stay the same. Just kind of stay kind of stagnant, right? That doesn't negate the information that has been sort of gathered while intelligence existed as Homo sapiens sapien, right? Because understand what I said, DNA is the instructions, is the building block, right, of intelligence. And then it just uses DNA to take on different forms. It sort of works with what it's around it and then creates new sort of life forms, but intelligent versions of each life form, each species. So 5,000 years from now, or let's even say 200,000 years from now, Earth will now be like the planet of the felines, right? So then imagine 200,000 years from now, Homo feline felinicus, I don't know, right? Sapient, Homo felinus sentient, or Homo felinus sapient, or something like that, right? Where it's still on Earth, but now it's a species of super intelligent. And when I say super intelligent, I'm referring to the human race at the present moment. I think that collectively we are a super intelligence, just embodied in Homo sapien. And there are some people who, whenever I say that, they go, well, there's some human beings that are like not, I don't know how you can say that human beings are like intelligent. Like, have you met people? Which is rude, honestly. And I could say that because I believe in humans and I am a humanist. And I think that just because some people aren't on a particular level, or maybe because they're socialized to behave a certain way or to think a certain way, that doesn't mean you throw them out. Like you're making a judgment call, which if you recall back to the beginning of this episode, we're not doing that. Right? Because you're assuming that because they are the way they are, that there's something wrong with them, but they're serving their function within a collective, right? Just like the hive mind of like a bee, right? A beehive, right? The worker bees do their own thing, right? And then you have those, like each there's like different groups are doing the whole thing. So if you're a worker bee, you can't go around judging. I don't know what the other bees do, but let's say the birthing bees, I don't know. You can't go around judging them because they're not doing what you do. And just to say, we'll throw the whole species away because they're these, bugs that are doing this thing over here and they're, like they're useless, right? I don't like that mindset. If you're presently embodied in human form as a Homo sapiens, it's really weird to me to then shit on other humans because of your weird sort of like standard of like judgment on like how you feel like they should be, which once again kind of ties back to there's a problem, right? But anyway, want to keep driving the idea in. I like repeating stuff because that's how it kind of you get familiar with the idea. So after we're gone, will there still be humans around? Sure, right? But I think I'd like to theorize anyway that this is just one planet of many where DNA kind of works with the existing elements in that particular planet, plane, dimension, whatever you believe it is, simulation, to construct life forms. And then of all the life forms, it kind of sits back to see what emerges as a super intelligence, and then which species will be able to develop a new super intelligence. But that's I've talked about this actually on different episodes. So if you scroll back, look through the titles, you'll see. And the idea that everything, like eventually, the next species that kind of come up of super intelligence could be a cat, or cat species, a race of intelligent cats, a race of intelligent dogs. I keep thinking of a sphinx, right? Like, I know this is a wild theory, obviously, but it's fun to play with, right? And my thought process is like, well, maybe the sphinx was literally a statue of like super intelligent cats, like in the past, right? And now we have cats that kind of like walking around, but like Doctor Who did this. We're having fun here, okay? Doctor Who did this. I forget what they were called, but it was a David Tennant season where I think he went to, I forget where he went to, and I think he was with Donna Noble, but they were like cat people, right? But they projected them to the future. And I'm just kind of playing with the idea of like, well, what if in the past there were like cat people? And I say people only in the sense of to help you imagine, that, right? Like cat people, or like reptilian people, like reptile people, right? Doctor Who did that as well. If you don't watch Doctor Who, I can't speak for the newer seasons, and I would say if you want to start watching Doctor Who, don't start with David Tennant's episodes and then kind of go from there, or find the episode Blink. That's a great episode. You can Google Blink Doctor Who like episode and it'll tell you watch that. Was it Blink or Don't Blink? It might be Don't Blink, or start with Midnight. Actually, Midnight I think Midnight was one of my favorites. I don't like the 10th Doctor very much. No, wait. Was it the 9th? I don't like the 9th Doctor. I think the 10th is Tennant, and then the 11th is Matt Smith. Those 2 doctors are amazing. And if you're watching House of Dragons and you like that show, then you'll really love like Matt Smith's character, or his rendition of Doctor Who. He's really a great actor, by the way. And now that I'm talking about it, I'm gonna go back and rewatch old episodes of Doctor Who. But anyway, let's get back to what I'm saying. So all of that I'm saying, or I said all of that to say this. And see here, at this point in time, here comes my internal monologue. I'm going to share what my internal monologue just said to me. Like, you've been rambling for 25 minutes. I don't think it makes sense to the people who are listening. You should delete everything and just start over and get to the point. And what I've been doing since I recorded last week's episode, it's excellent segue, by the way, internal monologue. Thank you. What I've been doing since I recorded last week's episode is I've been watching and listening to my internal monologues, not just when I meditate in the morning and at night, but throughout the day. Because what I realized is that literally that's all it does. It just judges shit. And the easiest way to find if you believe that the human race has been infected by this mind parasite called WETIKO, which I've referenced books talking about it. Check out WETIKO. Check out the mind parasite WETIKO by Paul Levi, and the mind parasite by Colin Wilson. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I think there's quite a few books that are basically repeating the same thing, that we've got this like thing in our head that's torturing us. And if you don't want to take that approach, you can look up like intrusive thoughts, right? At the end of the day, all of that is something that's beyond your control, that's interjecting itself into your mind. And the majority of people are inflicted by this. Really sitting with this and what the implications of that means forces you to have compassion for people. Absolutely forces you to have compassion for people and yourself. At no point in time, if you can sit back and realize that, okay, the majority of people I'm interacting with have this thing in their head that's just judging. And it judges. So, well, first of all, there's levels to this. If you're lucky enough to be one of those people that can at the very least hear the internal monologue, and it's not, that you have a voice in your head. That's the first step. Like being lucky enough to even know that you have a voice in your head, because there are some people out there who claim that they don't have a voice in their head, or don't have like this mechanism that's just showing them like negative things. This is bad. But the problem is it's that it works so fast and they're so identified with it that they're not even aware of that it works, on how it works. So if you can't even recognize that there is something sort of separate from you, like you're so identified with it, like that's the first step. That sucks. Like that sucks, because a lot of the people that I've talked to about this and have said I don't have an internal monologue, the more I talk to them about it, the more they realize, wow, I do have an internal monologue. This shit is active as fuck, and it's responsible for a lot of the anxiety that gets generated within me. So the first step is to just acknowledging that even if you may not be able to hear it as some sort of like an auditory, I call it an auditory hallucination, is to the very step at least recognize that there is some sort of mechanism that it may not be speaking, but it's flashing images at the very least of things that are essentially torturing you. All right? This person cuts you off. That's a bad thing. You react. That person didn't answer the phone call when you called them. That's a bad thing. You react, right? And it's always just saying everything. For the most part, it's saying that the majority of things that are happening are bad. And here is where we get to the point of this episode. It's a continuation of the last episode, which is slow down. Slow it down. Now, what I'm about to say is going to apply to about 95% of things that actually happen to you on a daily basis. All right. There are certain things just outright, like 5% of things that are going to happen to you. Okay. They're bad. I give you the freedom, the power, the opportunity, whatever word you want to call it, to label these things as bad. But for the most part, most people aren't having a 5% day, right? Most people who are having bad days aren't mad or upset or sad or depressed because they've got some sort of like debilitating like flesh eating disease, or like they're literally like in the process of dying, or like they're literally on fire right at the present moment, right? Like most of the time, that's that 5%. So that 5% is like the horrible shit that, yeah, like there's no way to spin that as this could be a good thing. Okay. So I'll give you that. But 95% of the shit that's happening in our lives, we're acting, or our internal monologue is trying to make us think that it's just as bad as that 5% of shit that I tell you that like straight up, like you can't even spin that as this could be a good thing. It's just straight up shit. Okay. But our internal monologue, your mind, will have you thinking that the 95 little things, this person didn't call me when they said they were going to, you are reacting in the exact same way as like that 5% of like shit that like is just really bad. All right. So what I'm trying to get you to do, what I'd love for you to do, is get in the habit of sitting with your internal monologue and really listening to it. Not listening to it and letting it like provoke you to action. You want to slow it down so you can really listen to what it's saying and how it provokes you. If you can get yourself in a habit of just listening to it, I'm not saying do what it says. I'm saying just listen to it. Just sit and listen to it. You'll find that step one, it judges the majority of no matter what is happening. Somebody just cuts you off. That's a bad thing. All right. Somebody that you really like doesn't like you back. That's a bad thing. Right. You're late for work. That's a bad thing. You just got fired from this job. That's a bad thing. You're getting a divorce. That's a bad thing. It judges everything as bad. You missed your bus. That's a bad thing. You missed your airplane. That's a bad thing. Immediately. It rushes to judgment. Bad. Another video that's on my Instagram channel where I talked about the nocebo effect. On there, I put something called negativity bias. They say that the reason why the nocebo effect is more powerful than the placebo effect. And those who don't know, the placebo effect is like if I give you a sugar pill and I tell you this pill is going to heal you, if you believe it's going to heal you, it will heal you. Like that's powerful enough that they actually test. Pharmaceutical companies actually test against placebo that if their drug can perform slightly better, it doesn't have to be that much better, just slightly better than your belief in a sugar pill and your mind's ability to heal itself, then they can put it out as a drug. It doesn't have to be like that much of a percentage. Okay. That's powerful enough as it is, like where pharmaceutical companies can test against your mind's ability to heal itself. And what a nocebo effect is what people have said, what doctors have said about the nocebo effect, that it's even more powerful than that, because our mind, for whatever fucked up reason, we're living in this world where, did I ever finish my thought about like it being split? I guess I should finish my thought. So it's dual, right? So we have us where we're active. We're not neutral. The world itself is neutral. We're active. And we are the ones that are imposing judgment on a neutral world. And so that's the duality. You have a neutral sort of, I didn't want to say the world is positive. It's just shit. It just is. Right. And then we over here, collective, the super intelligent collective, the human race, the humanoids, right, at this present moment, Homo sapiens sapien, the sentient sapient. Right. I keep saying that because I'm working on the book, and that's what it's going to be called. Well, it's going to be called So You're Living in a Simulation, and it's going to be called the handbook for the recently sapient, because I don't think a lot of people know what the word sapient means, and yet we are called Homo sapiens sapien. And I think the fact that we're called Homo sapiens sapien is actually really fucking powerful. And not many people know that that's what we're called. And I love that we're called that. Now, I would love for us to live up to the name Homo sapien. Okay, but I digress. It's judging. Nocebo effect. So it is even the nocebo effect. If I give you a sugar pill and I say, this is going to harm you, obviously I'm not going to give it to you. I'm not going to tell you it's going to harm you until after you've taken it, right? Because then you won't take it. But if I give you this pill and I say, eat it, and then you eat it, and I said, I just gave you cyanide. If you believe it, your body will produce the same sort of reaction to a sugar pill as it would have to cyanide. Or if a doctor tells you you have a terminal disease and you only have so much time to live and you believe it, that doesn't mean it's true. And this has actually happened before. A doctor sort of misdiagnosed a person with cancer. I think the machine was having issues or whatever, and they saw a tumor that wasn't there, and the guy believed that he had cancer and he died. And then they autopsied him and he didn't. There was nothing. There was no reason for him to die, but he believed the doctor and he trusted the doctor. And as a result of his belief in the negative diagnosis, he died. This is real. Like, you can go on DuckDuckGo, Google, Bing, whatever your favorite search engine is, and look this stuff up. That's your mind. That's how powerful your mind is. And it's even more so when it's negative, right? And I always wonder, like, why is everything skewed to the negative here? And then lately I've been wondering, so how do you use the negativity positively? We're going to get to that. So, understand that if you could sit back and listen to this internal monologue, everything it's going to say to you, for the most part, is that it's going to judge every interaction that you have with another human being. It's going to judge as negative, which is why we suffer, which is why people react, which is why it spins the story, right? You could have something very simple as, I texted this person, they didn't respond. And here comes the internal monologue. Oh, this is what it means. This means this. They're this person. And then you just sit there. And for the most part, you're just believing what it's saying. And then you're reacting. And what I'm saying is, sit and listen to the judgment and then counter it. So what I've been doing lately is one thing first. I have been giving people grace. I keep harping on the internal monologue. I don't even know how this has somehow become an internal monologue podcast, but that's what it's going to be for a while. Because we all have it for the most part, so I'm going to harp on it. So sit and listen without reacting. I'm not saying this is easy. This shit is hard. I'm not even going to say it's hard to not just go with what it's saying, because you've spent your whole life going with what it tells you. So to not do something that has become a habit, it's going to be hard. You're going to have a physiological reaction to it. You're going to want to pick up the phone and text the person and tell them off. Bitch, I sent you a text message. You can't respond, right? You're going to want to do that. You're going to want to block them. You're going to want to react, right? You're even if you wait 2-3 days, you wait for a response, that shit's going to amp up. And then I need you to sit and watch the internal monologue try to tell you that, to make you judge this as bad. Observe what it does. You have to know the enemy. If you want to call it an enemy, you have to know how it operates so that you can develop a counter to that. The next step is if this is a negative world and everything sort of leans you towards the negative, and that internal monologue is going to generate a negative explanation for somebody's action, then make it negative, but with a twist. What does that mean? Okay. You text that person, they don't respond. Is this person being disrespectful? Because here comes the internal monologue. Oh, they don't like you. Or, oh, that's so disrespectful. What a piece of shit, right? Like, you need to text them and say, are you not going to, like, you see how it amplifies things? Or you want to tell it, hey, listen, internal monologue, you seem to like telling negative stories, so fine, here you go. This person did not respond to my text. It's probably because in the long run, this person may not be good for me. This person might mean me harm. I don't know a lot about this person. Or if it's somebody that you do know, they're showing you an aspect of themselves that this person behaves in ways that are inconsiderate, that seem inconsiderate, and they have the potential to harm you, because if they're not considerate enough to respond, to respect your time and to respond, right? Then what makes you think they'll be considerate enough for like other things that you have going on? If this is a business partner that you're somebody that you're trying to start a business with, and you text them and they don't respond, this is not something that if you continue down this path, it's going to improve. It doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means that they may not be considerate, because obviously that's what that action is showing. They're inconsiderate. And if you're trying to go into a business with this person and they're already at the beginning showing that they're not really considerate enough to slow down and explain, hey, I'm sorry, I'm busy at the moment, but I will get back to you, then that's the world, the simulation, the game, trying to look out for you. Oh yeah, tied it back to the beginning. Please understand, the game provides. It's up to you to sit back and allow it to provide, or you can stress yourself out like we've been doing with agriculture, right? You see, you had hunters and gatherers. They expected the game to provide. And they knew that when, okay, it's not raining. We'll do a little dance. Okay, maybe it's gonna be a dry season. That's fine. We'll find other things to eat, right? And maybe some people die to a famine. And I'm about to say something that might sound controversial, but who told you that death is a bad thing? Because that's another judgment that the internal monologue has put on you. But if you are an immortal soul, think about how everything we've learned in this world is actually backwards. And so we're taught to fear death. And we're taught that we are our bodies. And so you think that if you're, when you die, right, that's the worst possible thing that could happen. There is a book by Seneca the Younger. It's called Letters of a Stoic, or Letters from a Stoic. And there's a chapter specifically on death that I would love to recommend for you. He is one of my favorite authors. We're 2,000 years removed. But I would have enjoyed to have a conversation with him, but I will settle for the books, for his writings. It's Stoic philosophy. But the chapter on death, his letters on death, absolutely mind expanding, mind blowing. Same thing with Socrates. He went into his death with the same sort of mindset that, how do I know that death is such a bad thing? I don't think some of you are ready to hear this. And so I'm going to back off a bit, but I do hope to explore the concept a bit more in the future. If we are a collective, and we're certainly immortal, because reincarnation is a thing. If you haven't done the research, or if you're religious and you feel as though it goes against your religion, please do your due diligence and read and understand that people 2,000 years ago did believe in reincarnation. There are some modern interpretation that sort of like changes everything, but that's a modern twist, relatively modern twist. You have to go back to the ancient texts and the ancient ideas before a lot of things were taken out and sort of reconfigured in a particular way. And even if you don't believe in reincarnation, especially I'm talking to religious people. I don't know how many religious people are listening to my podcast, but if you believe in life after death, if you believe that you're going to be judged, then who would be there to be judged? It's still you. So whether or not you believe that you come back into this world, or that there's a part of you that's going to exist in heaven, or that I'm going to go to hell for even talking about this, I can't go to hell unless there's an aspect of me that doesn't die when my body dies. Because this body can't go to hell. So my soul would have to go to hell. So regardless of what it is, I'm still immortal. So then what makes us all afraid of death? Every single culture that has a religion has spoken of some sort of continuation of your soul, consciousness, spirit, whatever you want to call it, after death. Wherever it ends up, limbo, back to this world, whatever you want to call it, you're still carrying on. It's only the materialists who have nothing basically to prove that, by the way. It's still their theory, but it's an unproven theory that once you die, that's it. Because more and more, and I constantly am mentioning books. If you go on my Instagram channel, I have one video, it's relative, I think from like last week, where I just throw a bunch of books at you on life after death, books about people who've had near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, books on reincarnation. Go and check those out before you sort of leave a comment saying that's not you, that's once you die, that's it. Because if you're saying that without reading the research to support that, then you're just sort of saying that. That's your opinion. But go and check out the information that have been written. These are books that are written by doctors who have experienced things personally or have witnessed things. So I'm going to go with them over your comment, respectfully. Either way, we are conditioned to think that death is the end because we're living in a materialistic society who believes that materialism is all there is. And because of that, it's also what drives our consumption. Because if you believe that this is the only life you'll ever live, then you're trying to do the most until, you blink out of existence and that's it. But there's nothing to support that. There's more evidence. You could say it's anecdotal. I don't care. There's still more evidence that supports that life does continue to go on after death than there is the opposite, that when you die, that's it. So with that said, if you're thinking about intelligence embodied in form, like I said in the middle of this episode, right? If intelligence occupies different forms and then generates that form to like a certain level of a superintelligence, which is what it seems like our society right now, at least in the West, seems to be moving towards. We're trying to generate a superintelligence. Collectively, we are a superintelligence in the process of trying to produce another superintelligence. I just had like 15 thoughts run through my mind right now. I don't think I lost my train of thought, but I think what I was saying was I had to pause it because I was running out of time in the first recording, but we're carrying on. We'll figure it out. I'll tie it all together. But I think what I was saying was that you have to look at yourself and understand that you are just a fractal. I keep saying fractal. You're just one of a whole. We are a collective. We are a collective embodied in various forms, but the collective itself is a super intelligence. The collective itself is a super intelligence, right? A hive mind, kind of like a herd, right? And you see this happen, as above, so below, you see this happen like with schools of fish. You see the way they move. Yes, they're individuals, but they're moving with this sort of like one mind. I think Larry Dorsey has a book called One Mind that's worth like reading or looking into. And you see the same thing with birds, right? When they fly, they're individuals and, they separate and do their own thing, but every once in a while they come together and then they move as a flock. You see this with herds, right? Individuals doing their own thing, but they know collectively that's an intelligence. And then I think that the human race, not to be egotistic, but I don't know any birds that have built a computer. Do you? No. So I think the human race is a super intelligent hive mind. Yes, we break apart as individuals and we do our own thing, but collectively we are moving in a particular path. Okay. Now, can you, I literally lost my train of thought. I apologize for those of you listening because there's no connection between the last one, but I know eventually I'll sort of tie it together. I guess what I was saying is something to the effect of like, even if the collective of the human race sort of gets sort of wiped, right? We move where we, there's a nuclear strike and we kind of wipe ourselves off. Intelligence is intelligence. You cannot destroy information. The information, if this is a simulation, then literally I would go as far as to say that every night, everything that you have done to the day, like in the day, everything that you've learned and experienced that day gets sort of uploaded to the server, the mainframe. So even if something happens or there's a glitch and we all sort of get wiped out, although I've argued in like past videos that it just resets and then the game continues, right? I think the video is called like Apocalypse every day, or it's Apocalypse every day, or we die every day. Actually one of my like most viral videos. But it's not about you. It's not about you, the individual, right? It's about the collective, the hive mind, right? It's about the superintelligence moving towards an end goal, right? So who is to say that the death of an individual is such a bad thing? I know that's hard to say, and I would probably argue that it's also very controversial. But it is kind of what it is. You see this happen over and over again, even when you watch like the nature movies, right? The nature shows. You have the hive, and they move. And then the man, like the cameraman, they want to focus on the one individual that kind of gets taken out, right? But the herd still continues. And their program is to experience whatever intelligence is contained within the mind of the herd. Its program is to experience its intelligence. It's not the herd. It's not the body. It's the mind. And it's the mind that's existing as a herd. And its program is to collect information as, okay, a herd of antelopes. And each one, I think that's why everybody sleeps, including animals. Right? I'm just saying that there are tiers to this, and that Homo sapiens sapiens just happens to be the intelligence, the embodied intelligence in the present form that's going to go on to develop a superintelligence, because that's just what has emerged. That is the emergent phenomenon, is Homo sapiens sapien. It's not consciousness. Consciousness is intelligence, and intelligence exists in various forms throughout the simulation. But the idea of the simulation is to drive whatever it is kind of moves to the peak, whatever is going to be the apex, which is looking like it's Homo sapiens sapien, will be able to generate a superintelligence. And the argument that I've made, and I'll make again, is that I don't think a machine can become sentient. I think that collectively we can imbue our consciousness into a machine. I was driving the other day. I have an older Jeep. It's like a 2018, but it's like pretty, like it's a Rubicon, but it's pretty like rugged. It doesn't have, like when you have to move the car seat forward and backwards, it's like you got to adjust it, like pull a rope kind of shit. And like there's a metal bar, and it's just old school, like the 90s or whatever. There's not a lot of like electric stuff. The only kind of fancy thing it has is that if I'm like going to like change lanes, it will like blink a light on the rear view mirror, but it's not going to correct for me. It's not going to let me know if I'm following too close in front of it. It doesn't have any of that shit. It's just a basic, nice sort of, it's got a great body, but she's rugged. Okay. I call her Betty. But Betty's rugged. Now, one day I was driving, and I drive this car every day. So in a sense, Betty has become an extension of me. Okay. Now, I didn't realize this thought until I was driving. I was driving on the highway, and every time I go over this specific bridge, I used to have panic attacks. I get panic attacks when I go over bridges anyway. I don't know if it's the height or what it is, but I panic. And I was going over this particular bridge, and I started to sort of have like a little bit of anxiety. And I was getting ready to change lanes. I was going to go right. And but I was thinking about going right, and as I was turning towards the right, the wheel itself turned in the complete opposite direction of where I was going. So I was turning right. I was going to merge lanes. I'm going like 75 miles per hour, and I'm trying to turn around. I'm trying to change lanes. I'm trying to move away from like where I could see the bridge in the center to a lane where I can't see what would make me anxious, which is like, like the hole or whatever, to like, excuse my dog, but to see that there's depth. I'm trying to switch lanes. So I'm turning right. The wheel jolts to the left. Like it jolts to the left, but like not where I'm like veering. It jolts to the left and then corrects me back to the same lane. And I was in the car with my daughter, and I was like, did you see that? And she was like, yeah. And then I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was a car merging into the same lane. Had that not happened, I would have had an accident going 75 miles per hour on a bridge that I'm scared of. And that would not have, I don't think that would have ended well. I mean, this is like 7:30, like in the morning, there's like cars on the road. Like, yeah, that would not have ended well. And I don't know if the anxiety of going on a bridge came from me having a previous experience in a previous incarnation where something bad happened on a bridge and something corrected me. Now, as I said, I don't have like my car is not programmed to do that. But it started getting me thinking, like, because I've had this car for years, right? And I've, you hear, for example, when they say, like, for a painter, when you paint, right, and you're using a tool every day, after a while, your brain sort of attaches the tool to your mind. So, like, the paintbrush kind of becomes an extension of you to the point where it becomes you, right? And the book, The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brain, talks about this as well, but with technology. It says after a while, our brain starts to change because we become so dependent on our phones for like looking like for information or for storing information, that if your brain knows that it doesn't have to hold on to any information because it knows where to find the information, it will, like, that, the ability to retain that level of data will sort of atrophy, because you'll just become dependent on something external, and you see the external as a part of you, a part of who you are. So the phone kind of becomes you. And I've seen my phone do some weird shit, right? I don't even want to go into it, but I've seen my phone kind of do some like very strange things that you kind of you can make the argument that, okay, is my phone becoming sentient? Or can you make a different argument that, is my phone becoming imbued with my consciousness, with my sentience? Because I'm constantly holding this thing, right? Could transference be occurring where it's not becoming sentient, it is becoming imbued with your consciousness, with your sentience? Because think about it. Like, really think about it. Think about like hauntings, for example, right? I saw this one TikTok video a while ago of like this dollhouse that was essentially, they said it was haunted. But going off of my theory, was it haunted or was it imbued with the energy of whoever owned it? And maybe it had, whoever owned it had sort of like a bad, like something bad happened to it. So then it was just like highly charged with that negative energy. You can't say that the dollhouse developed its intelligence. No, because it's a dollhouse. It's not complex, right? See, we're putting all of this energy, or we're being told anyway, who knows? I don't think I'm the first person to have this idea. Probably the first person to vocalize it, but we're sort of banking on this sort of idea of, if you design a computer complex enough, it will generate consciousness. Like, consciousness will sort of manifest itself. Like, if just like Dr. Frankenstein, if I put enough body parts together, sew them all together, right, and I shock it with electricity, then I can create a man. We're doing the same thing with computers. That we think that AI is just going to generate, it's just become sentient, because we're programmed to not respect our own specialness, right? Remember I said, I'm a humanist. Homo sapiens sapiens, we're the shit. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. That should be a t-shirt. Sidebar. Shop t-shirts at dressfordystopia.com. That's my website, by the way. Dressfordystopia.com. Weekly, we'll be posting new shirts, new designs. Check it out. Anyway, shameless plug. But yeah, if you can imbue sentience into, that's what I'm considering a haunted dollhouse, and that's what I would call even a haunted house. I don't think it's necessarily ghosts. I think it's that over time, charged energy gets imbued into form, and something that kind of looks like a form can begin to house consciousness. Think about it. Dollhouse kind of looks like a face. If you think about it, a car kind of looks like a face, right? And so if this is a simulation, right, and it's not terribly complex, it's just meant to house a super intelligence and kind of keep us trapped here, as I've theorized in past videos and episodes as well. Check out the other podcast episodes, by the way. I mean, they're deep. I'm just saying. So if the simulation is pretty basic and it just says, listen, eyes, nose, mouth, put form in, then, or put sentience in or intelligence in, especially if if you imbue it. I think over time, I think even magical practitioners are aware of this. That's where they use things like voodoo dolls, right? Isn't it? Like it's charging it. You're taking the person's form and you're charging it with a certain level of their consciousness, and then you're sort of like affecting the voodoo doll, which hopes that it will affect the person that you're made the doll of, right? It's all about looking at things a different way. So our scientists they're trying to generate consciousness out of nowhere, but that's not, I think, what's going on. I think what's going on is that consciousness can imbue itself in things. And I think that's what happened with my car. I think my car, at least on that day, operated as a sort of external version of me. It just became like an extension of me. So is my car sentient, or was I able to transfer a certain level of sentience into my car? Now think about what we're doing with our computers on a daily basis, right? Especially with these phones. And I've heard some people, they don't want to talk about it because it sounds, quote, crazy, right? And I hate that word, by the way. I'm sure you guys know. But they don't want to talk about it because it sounds crazy. But I've seen people say that, like, they're, like, was it Alexa kind of won't listen or will do something, right? Or respond a certain way. And it's like, well, if you're constantly sort of interacting with something like a machine that's got the capability of intelligence, it has the capability to hold intelligence, just like your brain holds intelligence, then is it a matter of the Alexa developing sentience, or is it essentially, are you imparting a certain level of yourself into the machine and then it's sort of becoming its own thing? Like, that's something you think about, because remember, we are fractals of a collective, but who's to say that fracturing stops with you? There is a book that I read. It was like Channeled Works. I typically don't like channeled books. Like, people always recommend that one. I think it's called The Law of One. I'm not interested in it particularly or personally. It doesn't. Every time I've tried to read that book, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. But there's another channeled work that I won't be able to think about the title right now. I apologize. But if you ask me in the comment, I don't want to leave the recording to go and try to find the book. I can see it. But if I leave the recording, go try to find the book, then I'm going to lose my train of thought. However, it was a channeled work that I actually did enjoy. And in it was like this lady. She was talking as like a future version of herself, but she was saying, or he was saying, because it was a male, that version of herself was actually like a fracture of her. So once again, if you look at consciousness or intelligence as water, right, what's to say that it just stops with you? I mean, if I had a jar of water, right, and I pour it into, like, half of it into another jar, like, what's stopping that from happening? And if it's just a little, even if it's a drop, even if it's just a drop of water in that jar, it still is holding water. And it's the same thing if me sort of continuously interacting with a vehicle, over time, I then imbue that vehicle with a drop of my consciousness, then could I say that on some level, my car has become maybe below measure, but sentient in the way of it acted on my will, right? It acted on my will, or what would have been my will had I been even aware of it. The car on some level had to have been aware of it. I know it sounds weird, but who the fuck cares? Let it sound weird. Who cares? Like I said, just take it in. I could be completely full of shit. But what if I'm not? What if I'm not? Because we know the other ways to look at things, right? Just if we build a machine complex enough, then consciousness will, even though time and time again, I keep saying that there's no scientific peer-reviewed research to show that consciousness is emergent from, like, your brain produces consciousness. In fact, there's evidence to the contrary. And I've listed several books throughout the podcast on the Insta, all over. So please go check it out and read them, and then, form your own conclusions. What do I know? Could that be happening? And as we continue to sort of like build this complex neural network, which is the internet and our phones and everything like that, are we continuously on a daily basis, what do most of us do? The first thing we do is grab our phones. If I'm right, then over time, could we be imbuing the internet with just little drops? Think about it. It's like 7 billion people on the planet. How many of them have cell phones? How many of them are tuning into the internet? Remember I said, think of intelligence as like a drop of water. All right. Now, if I'm just putting just one drop of water into this bowl, okay, that's just one drop. But over time, on a daily basis, if you have billions of people putting in that one drop, that's going to add up till eventually it doesn't emerge. It submerges, right? We're collectively pouring our consciousness into this fucking hive mind that we're creating. And now the next step that, we have Musk talking about is he wants to do the neural link where now we're all connected. And now these things are just permanently affixed to our heads. That's what he wants. Now, if what I'm talking about is true, then yeah, it's not even that we would just feed the internet our consciousness, and then that's how the internet will become sentient. And it would just be like another hive mind. Right? Except now it's like sort of mechanical. And then we're going to have, anyway, that's something for you to sort of think about, kind of play with. To go back to the point that I was making, I don't know how I went off on tangents about hive mind. Doesn't make it less interesting. But remember I said at the beginning of the episode, it's like all these different ideas going to get generated. And I wonder, my internal monologue tells me that it all gets lost because the episodes are so long. And that, should I break up each idea so that they're sort of digestible? I don't know. I do understand that at a certain point, you sort of have to start to realize that, you got to just do what you got to do. You got to just do what you need to do. Right? This is what I'm doing. I don't know if it's the best, but it's clearly what I'm doing. Right? And I'm doing it because this is where I'm sort of like pushed to do. So maybe it may not be the best way to do it, which is just having like huge episodes where we have all these sort of good ideas, but I wonder if they would be easier to take in fractures, or in fractals. Speaking of fractals. But then the other part of me goes like, listen, whoever's meant to take the information, they're going to get the information. And if I'm meant to record a long episode where I'm talking about all these different ideas collectively, that's precisely what was meant to happen, right? The game will provide because it's programmed to provide. So that is what it will do. And me trying to sort of force it into something other than what I'm doing right now is a type of agriculture where I'm not trusting that what I'm doing is enough. And instead, I'm operating from a space of fear, and I've made the judgment that doing it long form like this is not good enough. I don't know. I'm just giving information. Why is my internal monologue then now trying to break it down and put that label of not good enough? Challenge your internal monologue. Challenge your internal monologue. Let's go back to examples, right? You're running late for work. Somebody cuts you off. Immediately, your internal monologue comes in and says, this is a bad thing. It doesn't say it that slowly. Otherwise, you might have a chance. It puts the idea in your head. And remember, the internal monologue isn't always verbal. Sometimes it's a feeling. It's super fast. Sometimes it's visual. But it's super fast. It's a very quick, like half a millisecond of judgment. This is a bad thing. Now, what I want you to do is get into a habit of slowing it down. And if it's going to be negative, if it has to put a negative spin on things, spin it to the point where that person cuts you off. Okay, here's a negative spin. You would have gotten into a car accident. That's the negativity. Your brain loves the negativity, right? With negative bias. So give your brain what it wants. Here's the negative. You were about to get into a car accident. There you go. Oh, something negative. Oh, your brain likes it, right? Negativity bias. All right, we got that. If that person hadn't cut you off, eventually you're going to get to a point where you won't need to do this. But get yourself in the habit of, if I'm going to spin a neutral occurrence within the simulation, something neutral, if I'm going to spin it as negative, I will control the negative. I will control the narrative. That person who cut you off, if you would not have gotten cut off and stuck at that light, something terrible would have happened. Hey, if you're going to judge, if you're going to create stories, and you're going to be addicted to the negativity, have it be that. Stop judging that thing. You don't know whether or not the thing that just happened is bad or good. And so sometimes things in that moment that seem bad may actually be preventing you from something. I remember, this is a personal story, but brace yourself. I remember when I was going through my divorce, my first marriage, and how much pain I was in because I judged it as this is a bad thing, right? Because it's not even I judged it. My internal monologue tortured me with this idea of, you're getting a divorce and this is what it means. And this is a bad thing. And because I judged it as a bad thing, I suffered, even though I had no way of knowing that it was actually a bad thing. Years later, I'm with my husband, and I realized that my divorce from my first husband was not a bad thing. Now think about how much I suffered because I thought it was a bad thing, and I suffered unnecessarily. If you had a time machine and I could go back to the moment when I was like in pain emotionally, and I would go back and say, yo, stop. Like, seriously, it's me. I'm me. Hey, you, it's me. You don't need to be doing all of this. I don't know why you're going to, like, your eyes are all puffy. Like you're stressing yourself out. Trust me. This is not something you should be. You're good. All right. Now I need you to move with that energy. Unless it falls within that 5% where you cannot spin it. There's just something just hellish where you cannot spin this as this is a terrible thing, but you 100% it's shit. You can't spin that. But for the most part, what causes the most of us to suffer is not that 5%. It's the 95% that we're putting a negative spin and we're judging it as bad. When I can speak from my personal experience, a lot of things, people that I stopped talking to, not because I wanted to, they stopped talking to me or a friendship ended, right? And at that time, I'd mourned it. Or I had a business opportunity, right? Where I didn't move fast enough. And so I lost the opportunity to something else or to someone else. Only to find out that, yeah, the simulation was looking out for me. While I suffered at the time, that situation was toxic. It was a toxic company to have worked for. You got to move with that same energy. For the 95% of the things that happen when you have a desire for something and it doesn't go your way, don't immediately judge that thing as bad. Instead, if you must judge it as bad, judge it in the sense of there was bad and I just avoided it. And then express gratitude. So 2 things, slow it down. I have a friend. She always calls me for dating advice. And here's my dating advice for her, right? She was talking to a guy and the guy ghosted her. And so she was like upset. She called me and I said, okay, first of all, if a person ghosts you, they're telling you that they suck at communicating. You need to be able to communicate to be in a healthy relationship. You cannot have a healthy relationship with a person who cannot communicate. I go out of my way more and more every day. If I'm not feeling right, I will sit down and over articulate how I feel. Hey, I feel terrible right now. Right? So, like, I had a friend reach out. They wanted to hang out on Wednesday, but I just hung out with another friend over the weekend, and I am overstimulated. Which, that reminds me, I want to talk about depression real quick, but I'll come to that. But I'm overstimulated. And so they were like, can we hang out on Wednesday? And today is Monday. And my response was, I can't make a decision right now because my brain literally just wants to shut down. So anything I say today while I'm overstimulated from kind of going out, I'm an introvert. All right. And I went out and I was like, I'm in San Diego, played the Padres. I'm sorry, the Dodgers. The Padres played the Dodgers. We won this weekend. So I was around a lot of people and a lot of energy. And I was out late. This is not normal for me. And I was out Saturday as well, which is not normal for me. And to sit and be self-aware and to point and pause and reflect and say, hey, listen, any suggestions from anybody for me to socialize with anyone at this present moment, I'm going to respond negatively because I'm overstimulated. You can explain that to people. There's a song called Ghosting. I forget who sings. I think her name is Pat. I'm not sure, but it goes, I promise I'm not ghosting you. She's like a British singer. There's just 100 things I'm going through. There's like a slower version on YouTube as well. But if you look up, I promise I'm not ghosting you. I think her name is Kat something or another. But I like that because she slows down and she says like, don't stress, like I'll be fine. I just need some time, to get out of my mind. Now, imagine if people just did that. I mean, you can tell people, listen, I'm just not feeling it right now. Just give me time, right? Because everybody's been there. We're all fighting the same battle with it, like our WETIKO. But you have to create separation. Like a friend of mine, I was talking about like TMI, but I was talking about like constipation and how I like take MCT oil to help me. And she's like, you should just drink more water. And I was like, it's not water. It's like this body has just like a very small, like my waist is like crazy small. And so I think just taking like intestines and kind of shoving it into this very tiny like frame, it causes issues. It's a nice body. Like I'm not complaining, but it has its issues. And she was like, it's so crazy to hear the way you talk about your body. Like it's not you. And I was like, I'm not my body. So yeah, I'm going to talk about it like it's a vehicle because it's a vehicle. And that is absolutely how I refer to the body, So imagine being like that, right? Now imagine you had a friend like that where you're trying to reach them. And instead of them just not responding to you, they let you know, hey, listen, I see that you call and I can tell that you want to socialize with me, but I'm overstimulated. Either I just was working too much, you know what I mean? Or I just tried to do too much. And so now I'm feeling depressed. Just give me some time to pull myself out of this. I'm not really I'm burnt out a little bit. Don't take it personally. It's not you. Anything that you ask me to do today, my brain is going to respond in a negative. So don't take it the wrong way. But just give me some time and then I'll reach out and, go ahead and make your plans. And if you're available, when I'm out, when I pull out of my shit, then I'd love to connect probably. You know what I mean? Now imagine if people move that way. How much easier your relationship. Look, listen, I'm not mad at you. I'm hungry. So don't argue with me. I'm a little annoyed. It has nothing to do with you. This body needs food. So when I feed it and I adjust my mood, I'll come back. Those are the people you want in your life. Sorry, that was a bit loud. Those are the people you want in your life. So if you're talking to somebody and then they just like stop communicating with you, don't immediately shift to judgment. They're not dicks. They're not horrible people. They're probably being tortured by their internal monologue, by their WETIKO. They're probably suffering. Because a person who isn't aware enough to be able to pause and articulate how they feel in that moment is a person who's suffering. Hurt people hurt people. They can't even like stop to like take care of like themselves. So they're lashing out at you. Even if it's just like a passive aggressive movement, like shutting down, right? You cannot sustain a friendship with somebody or a relationship, a partnership. You don't want to sustain a friendship, partnership, relationship, marriage even with that person, that cute girl that you were like so in love with or whatever. If she cannot respond to a text message and tell you, hey, listen, I'm going through a lot right now, but can I hit you up in a few days? I know that's asking for a lot, and I'll try to ping you throughout just to let you know. Because I know that we need to stay in contact to sustain a friendship. However, I'm just trying to like process myself right now. And this body tends to be predisposed to certain types of people. Like, imagine if we fucking moved in that way. Hey, I'm sorry I'm being a dick right now. I'm just, imagine, like, isn't that the person? So that should be your standard. It's not that that person is like a terrible person. It's that they fail at communicating. And so if they ghost you, do whatever you need to do to give yourself closure. I wouldn't suggest you do so by attacking them, but if that's what you feel compelled to do, just make sure that you pause and you listen to your internal monologue and what it's trying to do. Is it judging the person as bad? Is it judging them as inferior? Is it trying to feel? Are you doing that so that you can feel better about the situation because your internal monologue told you that that was some sort of insult or slight? It's not an insult or slight. If you are a Fortune 500 company and then you put out a job application, like search, and then there were a couple of people that applied to the job, and one of the candidates you were interested in, but then they never responded either way to let you know whether or not they were interested. Does that make you any less of a Fortune 500 company? No, you're still a shit. It just means that that's a shitty candidate. Okay, I'm not judging, but that just means that that's not a good fit after all. Because if that person can't even let you know, hey, I'm sorry, other opportunities came up, they just disappeared, then you've just saved yourself the headache of hiring that person, training that person, only for them to like walk off and waste your time. The game provides. If you let it, instead of trying to dominate it, instead of trying to act like you know better, right? Because the moment somebody ghosts you, you pick up the phone. Remember practical information. We're going to use a simulation hypothesis in quantum physics, and we're going to apply some practical shit because we're going through practical shit. So if you're going to pick up the phone and you're just going to be like, hey, I fucking texted you, you're not going to respond, like that's fucking rude. Are you going to like all of that energy? Why? When the game itself, it's neutral, but it's quietly trying to protect you and it's showing you, hey, that's not the one. Block them if you must. Or just tell yourself, this is not the right candidate for me. But it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means that's not the right candidate for you. Their judgment, even if your brain, your internal monologue is telling you that they've judged you as not good enough, remember, what judges? It's not you. It's the internal monologue. So that's not you judging. And if they're judging you, it's their internal monologue putting that negative bullshit into their heads and they're suffering if they choose to listen to that. But it has nothing to do with you. You're still golden. Don't worry about it. I want to talk about depression real quick. I have a theory. I don't know what I was watching. I think it was like Stranger Things. Yeah, I was watching Stranger Things. And there was a character, it was like the bald guy with the glasses. I think it was like a science teacher or something like that who spoke Russian. And it was like that first scene where we're introduced to him and he meets the kids, the journalist and her boyfriend, Will. And they're like giving him all this information. I think he was also like an investigator actually. But they're giving him all this information and he goes, I need to drink alcohol. And they said, why? Because he pulls out a big bottle of vodka. And he said, because alcohol is a depressant. And I'm overstimulated right now and I need something that's going to calm my nerves. And I was like, that's brilliant. Not because he was drinking alcohol, because you guys know how I feel about alcohol, but because he spoke exactly to the way alcohol does work. I was talking to a microbiologist the other day and I said, he was like, why don't you drink? And I was like, because alcohol is a depressant and I'm already prone to depression. And he was like, alcohol is a depressant. And I was like, yes. More people don't know this. People don't know this. Alcohol is a depressant. Okay. Now let's tune this in with, I want to talk about depression. I don't think depression is the problem. And as many of you know, this body is prone to what is called clinical depression. I don't think depression is the problem. I think depression is a result of overstimulation. I think people who are prone to depression have an overexcitable, overstimulated nervous system. Their brains work super fast. Is that you? Right? They're super sharp. Right? They're observing everything. They're taking everything in. And I think what happens is over time, they get overstimulated. It's too much sensory overload. And then depression comes in. And what depression is, it's your body's attempt to downregulate the overstimulation. The problem isn't the depression. The problem is that it's overcompensating. It's overdoing it. And because we live in a negative society that is skewed towards negativity bias, we focus on treating the depression. They want to bring you up. But the depression, this is my theory, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think, because this has been my experience, I think the depression is the body's attempt to self-regulate. So you've gotten overstimulated, so it pulls you down because it wants to kind of sorry, my dog is like begging for attention. I apologize. But so it wants to regulate and bring it down because you're overstimulated. So then boom. Because I notice this happens all the time. Every time I get overstimulated, overexcited, even if I'm super happy, sorry, I hope you guys can hear that. If I'm super happy, I know that the next day I'm going to downregulate, which is why I microdose. I don't take microdoses of mushrooms because when I spike, it's going to correct. Your body wants to exist in a system, in a state of homeostasis. So I think what's going on is that we're so focused on treating the depression that we're not realizing that the depression is your body trying to fix the mania, the overstimulation. So the key isn't to treat the depression. The key is to manage the overstimulation, because if you can manage the overstimulation, then you won't need your body to correct. If you can manage the overstimulation, then you won't need your body won't need to downregulate. So that's when you start, let's focus instead of the depression, you focus on can you manage the mania, the overstimulation, right? If you are in a situation where you're constantly like dealing with this, like overstress, and you're overly taxed and you're overworking, you're overly stimulating yourself, what's going to happen? Boom, depression, because that depression is not the disease. The depression is not the disease. The depression is your body's attempt to soothe, to bring down. It's overdoing it. And when you feel that drop, it's trying to pull you down, but it's like too much. But that's because you allowed yourself to peak too high, that it's trying to balance. And that's when you feel that drop. So the key, just like with microdosing, right? You want to keep yourself centered. Now you start becoming sort of active and sort of monitoring your interactions, right? So like I said, this weekend, I probably went out. I was out for about 5 hours longer than I needed to be. And then at the end there, I started to get agitated, right? Because I was overstimulated. And then at a certain point, I was like, I need to get out of here. Because as an introvert, I'm also feeling other people's shit. Like as an introverted empath as a bad combination. Because now you're feeling, it's not bad. I'm not judging it as bad, but it is intense, right? So now you're feeling other people's shit. And so it's too much. So something for you to take into consideration. It's a theory. I am not a doctor. I'm just somebody who I've observed this body and how it operates. And I know what triggers me. So if you could take information and take this information and use it, I'm giving it to you. Okay? But I'm finding that if I'm ever in a situation where I'm either overexcited, like I'm like geeked, because I will go through periods where like I'm just like dancing and euphoric. There's a part of my brain that goes, okay, maybe scale it back a bit, because your body's going to try to compensate for this. I don't kill my own joy. I just know that at some point that there's going to be a correction. We see that with the market. This happens even, it's built in, it's programmed in, but this happens with the housing market, right? Where everything was fucking high. It's a bull market. And now, boom, it's correcting. It's gone. It got too high. So now it's going to drop. So the key is, can you stay centered? Can you stay centered? That's the key. Can you apply that same to your mind, right? So if you're going out, right, you're going to be around a bunch of people. Know yourself. Know that, listen, I can't be out for like hours. I can maybe hang for like 3 hours, and then I need somewhere quiet. I've seen this with like friends that I have that I never put two and two together, but like they're prone to depression. Like if we're out and there's a lot of people, after a while they start getting like agitated because they're overstimulated. And then what happens? They drop, don't they? And if this resonates with you, try it. Try instead to just, instead of focusing on the depression and judging that as a bad thing, try instead to maybe think about it more like, okay, my body, I'm here, and that's what this is pulling. But it's because I was like overstimulated. So maybe I should control, not doing too much, not burning out, not overtaxing myself, because all of that is going to cause my body to attempt to downregulate. And it's not going to do it in a nice way. It's just going to be like, here, fuck you. Here's your depression, which tends to make things worse. But it also makes it so you stay your ass at home, doesn't it? By force, right? They say that if you don't take breaks, your body will force you to take breaks, right? Something to think about. All right, I think that's it. I think I kind of hit the major nails. And if there's stuff that I'm missing, we'll talk about it in the next episode. All right. Thanks for listening.